Let's go. So, welcome everybody. This is the Disinfo Resilience Network podcast or videocast, and I'm very happy to welcome Monique Camarra today. And she is really a great expert. And I think I have this theory that we have only 100 people in the world who really understand what is going on. And Monique is for sure in the top 10, even of these golden group. So, Monique, before I say anything wrong, please introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, where you're from, where you're going, and what your goals are.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dietmar, first of all, for inviting me because I think this is such an important work, okay, that you are doing with your group. And it's extremely important that we reach out to as many people as possible and get certain facts, right, straight. First of all, I mean, I'm here in Siena, Italy, and I'm an instructor at the university at the Department of Communications. So I slip in every once in a while into my courses all of, let's say, the facts, strategies, and tactics, and everything that we need in order to fight information warfare. I also am doing some professional training at the Institute of World Politics, which has opened a complete, let's say, a world to me that was able to give me a lot of substance, the basis of what we need. Okay, when we're engaging with the public, engaging with our governments, engaging even with our friends and family. So this has been, let's say, fundamental to my formation. I also, with Olga Lautman, we're on pause right now because she's working on some things and I'm working on some other things, but we also have Kremlin File podcast where we dig in, let's say week by week, and we're on pause. We dig into what the Russians are doing globally. So we're looking at all sorts of operations that they use, their active measures, kinetic warfare that they are engaging, okay, worldwide. So this is where I'm at, and this is what I do.
Thank you very much, especially for mentioning active measures, because active measures actually it's an old term. Yeah, it comes from the
Yeah.
Soviet times, and in my opinion, it's still exactly the same with additional possibilities with the digital warfare and especially social media and so on. Which brings me to my first question: how much does it bother you that when we
Mm,
speak about influence campaigns
mm.
and Russian interference, but also Chinese interference, there are a lot of parallels and joint ventures between these two autocratic countries. How much does it bother you that so many people think it's only a social media thing and simplify?
Oh, yes, it is the one thing that I think we need to change in terms of mindset with everybody that approaches, let's say, social media and the way they look at it. It's not everything that Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, all of the let's say authoritarian governments that have closed information systems. Everything that they do is what we call influence. It is to wield influence over us in any way. And what do I mean by that? I mean that they are trying to change the way that we look at things and change our decision-making processes. So social media is not, let's say, where, if we look back, Dietmar, I don't know about you, but I remember my first account on FB was basically just posting little pictures and saying hello to friends, and it was social in that sense. Today, we are in an environment where these regimes have, and also non-state actors as well. We're not just talking about state actors, non-state actors, terrorist groups. These kind of things are using, let's say, this access to a micro access to people in order to change, okay, their perception of reality and steer them towards what they want us to do. So this is very, very important to understand. In fact, as I was reviewing some notes, the first thing that came to mind is that when we look at social media, we should sort of start to think, okay, well, I'm going into an environment now that, first of all, is private because these are private companies, right? They're not state-owned companies. These are private companies. As you would in any store, any environment whatsoever that is unfamiliar to you, that is not yours, you need to have your defenses up. Okay, you need to understand, where am I? What am I seeing? Who am I interacting with? Because there are going to be people who are authentic, and there are also going to be manipulators, okay, on social media. And this is something that I'm sure most of us understand, but it is within a whole toolbox of measures, as you brought up before, measures that are used to influence us. Okay, so, and influence decision makers, influence people, let's say, who have contact with grassroots organizations and all of that kind of thing. So this is a new environment. Okay, it's actually not new. This has been going on for quite some time. The history of it, and one day maybe Dietmar, we can do a whole historical overview, right, of how social media was used in the past, but also for protest movements, right? The very first one that was used in Mexico, where no, we had the Zapatistas who used it in order to organize the protests, authentic protests, and garner international support for their, okay, for their, let's say, their desires and their strategies and what they were aiming for, their goals, right, with the Chiapas, in the Chiapas area against, the Mexican government. And that was the first time it was used. But this is something that maybe we can go into in a little more because it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But you're absolutely right. Today, this kind of environment, we need to go in with a different mindset. It's part of a whole influence strategy, and it's part of the domains of warfare: air, sea, land, cyber, and human, okay, as well. Now, NATO has expanded, all right, all of the different domains. So just not the kinetic part of it, but also cognitive warfare and all of that kind of thing. So you're absolutely right. Absolutely. And I'm sure you're seeing it in Austria as well, Dietmar.
Yes, we have seen it a lot, and we are affected. I mean, this is also one of the problems that I see, that we think we are not affected if we have
Mm.
the imagination we are not target audience, and then I respond in a way that we are. It doesn't matter if we are target audience. If the target audience are English speaking people, then we will
Mhm.
see it, especially on social media, because there are no borders around. Huh? And the
No,
same
no.
thing,
Yeah,
the algorithm,
completely.
it
They're
shows
gone.
me things that are actually targeted to the MAGA campaign, but they show it to me, and it's the same as with the German-speaking world. Everything that is targeting Germany is, of course, also affecting the Austrian information environment, and unfortunately, vice versa. Yeah, our neutrality narratives, they go also towards Germany,
Yeah,
and they say, "Oh, we wish we would have the same," or something like
yeah,
that.
sure,
But
because it's cross-pollination, right? This is the
but
way it works.
but I have a very specific question to you, because I have a problem when I speak about how many narratives of the
Mm.
authoritarian regimes finally, unfortunately, also make their way towards mainstream media, established media. Then I'm a little bit afraid that I have somehow the same message than all these conspiracy theorists and disinformation agents who always claim, it's a lying press, it's a Western media is lying. But
Mm.
I have a quite opposite message, because I say no, it's not the way they say, because they actually are using a strawman argument. They claim that Western media is reporting all the time in a pro-Western way, but there are surprisingly many narratives of authoritarian regimes by, for instance, talk show guests, guest
Yeah,
commentaries, but
sure.
also by bad journalism. And I would like to hear, first of all, your thoughts about that, and also how you would distinguish between realizing
Mm.
that, of course, media and good journalism is very important, but recognizing that there are also problem in the same problems that we are addressing.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Let's say, let me organize my thoughts on this one because it's a big topic. First of all, we need to understand in journalism, there are different kinds of journalism. Okay, so there are journalisms that play on our biases. I mean, not every single news outlet, okay, follows the old standards that we used to have, where everything had to be you're reporting facts and there had to be vetting processes. And no, it was slow journalism. Okay. Today, there is also like Fox News, right, for example, that is, I mean, I don't call it journalism because it only touts these are people that are sort of affirmationists, okay, for a certain outlook. And the same on the left and the right, by the way. It's not, let's say, or with one, no, they're partisans all over the place. So this is this, but as long as we are, Dietmar, I think what is the most important thing is that we need to work. The very first thing that we need to do in these kind of cases, especially when we're looking at journalism on television, all the different media outlets that we have, is to work upon ourselves to understand, okay, what is my bias? Okay. What is, for example, the way that I look at things? This is something that it's the first steps actually in any training whatsoever in information, um, is, to counter it. When I say your biases, are you more inclined to accept certain kinds of arguments over others? Um, would you like, or are you going to retweet something, or let's say listen to a certain journalist, or a news story that captures you, that reflects your own, okay, ideas? Okay, first of all. So that's one thing. And we call that mirror imaging. All right. And it's also when you're looking at a news story or a analyst, a so-called expert from a think tank. Okay. Are they just mirroring what they want people? Okay. They're projecting onto, for example, Russia. Okay, that it is a peaceful nation, that it is ready for negotiations, right? That it is indeed, it has certain grievances, as we've seen even just recently, right? With some news stories and some analysts that have come out. Another thing is wishful thinking. Are we hoping in something and therefore we want to read it? Okay. Our ideological bents, right? If you are more, let's say, towards a more socialist outlook of thing, or are you conservative, or are you MAGA, okay, whatever that is, all right, alt-right, or traditionalist, or religious, right? And also the whole thing about in media, the corruption that takes place, okay, with certain media personalities that I know of here in Italy. I'm sure you know of some in Austria. We know in Germany where they are, in the United States where they are. So the first step is first doing, okay, let's say an X-ray on ourselves, the way that we think, because the thing is this, is that these media outlets work with this. This is what they take advantage of. They throw back at you what you really want to read. Okay, so you're not accepting other viewpoints, okay? Or no, you're accepting one thing, and they work on that. They work on the bias. They work on this bias, first of all, to be able to capture your attention instantly, right? Through keywords, language that you're more apt to accept, a headline that you're going to read and retweet very quickly or pass on to friends. This is where that bias comes in, okay? We need to slow down quite a bit. It's very difficult in this environment to slow down, right? This is the first task. Then there was a second part to your question as well.
The way we perceive media, and I mean, what bothers me a little bit is, when I discuss this topic with journalists, they see the problem. In many cases, they see the problem that we have this false balance reporting, and the way you
Mm,
described it, the dynamics of media, they need it because there is a demand for it, and there is a demand, and it's
yeah,
also about the pressure to have a reach because
yeah,
there's the competition with social media, and there's also the question of how fast are you in your
it
reporting.
is.
This is
Yeah.
another pressure point. But what I find, what I respond to this question, I totally understand this, and I'm very convinced in freedom of speech. I don't want to silence
Mhm.
anybody except if it's really extremely radical or some kind of Holocaust denial. But there should be a transparency, and we lack this transparency.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
especially when we speak about agents of influence, I don't mention name, please. Let's not
No,
mention names.
it's not
But
necessary. We know who they are.
and I think we need to. We don't have. I don't know about the situation specifically in Italy, but in Austria and in Germany, we lack a common understanding of the mechanics of these agents of influence, how they work. When we hear professor, we have
Mhm.
already so much respect. We think that this person is above everything according to knowledge and opinion, and there is no shield. We're not shielding. If you have a social media troll, you shield. So the social media troll without a face, without a profile picture, he can say the same narratives as the professor, but the social
Yeah.
media troll is going to be ignored, and the professor is still going to be considered a reliable source. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, what can we do about that? First of all, without getting sued,
Mm.
but secondly, can we raise awareness about this phenomenon?
Definitely. The whole agents of influence, you've touched on a topic that was pertinent, let's say, from the inception of the Soviet Union. Okay. Even before that, I don't want to go too far back, but let's say no, because we're talking about Russia. All the way through the Cold War. And also, they're still there today because it's not that those people died off. They're still there. It's not like they've left. All right. The thing is this, we are more apt to accept, as you were saying, the word of a professor, okay, um, because they have weight. We look at them as an authority. Okay. So this is why the agent of influence is so important. First of all, there are different levels, okay, of agents of influence. We need to understand that it's not just one kind of person. There are about
Can
four
you
different
describe
levels.
the levels of an agents of influence and how you would categorize them? Because I was asked the
Oh,
same
there.
question today in an interview, and I brought my definitions, but I would love to hear your professional
Oh,
opinion
no,
about
this
that.
is, yeah, no, this is the Soviets actually put down four categories, if I'm not mistaken, of agents of influence. So it's how much, the way that they're distinguished, first of all, is how much control the Kremlin has over these people. All right. So there are the ones that are totally under, okay, control. So they are fed, okay, information that they are supposed and how to get closer, right, to usually high level, okay, policymakers. They try to infiltrate any kind of organization or okay, we're talking about government departments and ministries in order to get very close to decision makers in the military and in political matters. Okay, so this is one, and these are like total control. All right, assets. Okay, in the thing, and usually they're paid. Okay, there are then other levels where they're not paid, but they're given payment in kind. Okay. And in this case, they may know or not know that, okay, they're working, usually they do, and they're paid in kind. So, for example, a professor at a small university in the Italian hinterland, is approached, okay, to have, no, they're approached and say, oh my goodness, you are just so absolutely brilliant. Where are some of your publications? Let us publish, okay, something. Or we would like you to come and speak a, at a conference in Moscow, okay, or in Crimea, whatever. All right. And they lay out the hotel is beautiful. They come and pick you up at the airport. You're treated like a king. After which, okay, you become enamored, all right, in a certain way. So they play on your insecurities or your wish to be able to shine, no, in your profession. So this is that kind, okay, of agent of influence, where then you are going to have conferences at your little university stating, okay, that Russia, okay, has grievances and we have to listen to them. And how about peace, okay, and all of that kind of thing. Other agents of influence can be those who are aligned, ideologically aligned, okay, with Russia. And there can be absolutely no payment. It's just they believe in the same thing. They drop, okay, the information, and they will gobble it up, all right, that kind of thing. And then you also have the unwitting, okay, idiots is what, is been called, where they don't know that they're actually working, all right, for Russia in some way, or China, or Iran in this case. And no, they could also be, for example, in a little association at a micro level that organizes a protest, and not knowing that behind there's a whole, let's say, funding that comes through from two different other associations, and it comes from Russia. This is the kind of thing. So there's four of these, okay? Romerstein is the person that, if anybody wants to know about agents of influence, he wrote, okay, an actual, all right, I think he worked for the CIA or for the government. Can't remember now his exact role, but he outlines exactly what the Russians, the way they, okay, define them. So this is not a Western definition. This is the way they have organized them. Now, another thing too is that now, for example, the Russians have fewer agents, okay, in the West, fewer intelligence agents in the West. So sometimes this also happened in the past. There was crossover between trying to persuade, okay, politicians or military, students, other academics, think tanks, so on and so forth, over, right, to their side, and also gathering intelligence, okay, as well, in order to give back to your friends, okay, or people that you are dealing with, okay, in Russia. One thing that's very important is that there are a lot of associations all over Europe that, let's say, are Russian, that they're there to, find people that they can bring into their sphere, and who could, become in one way and maybe in some form or another an agent of influence. But we shouldn't be thinking of, let's say, every person is being paid. No, some people do this for free. That's the whole thing, right? And they have the authority, right, Dietmar? You talked about professors, okay? The first thing when you're giving a speech, and this is just normal persuasive speech, the first thing you do is you announce your credentials. Why should you believe me? Why? I'm an authority. I'm an expert. It's the first thing that you do when you're giving a speech. And this is not even in propaganda. We're talking about, or influencing people. We're talking about persuasive speech, right? That's the idea. So that's why agents of influence are they're trusted. They are trusted voices. And there's very little vetting going on, Dietmar, right now. Very little, very, very little.
Can you, without mentioning names, I mean, there are a few examples. For instance, in the German peace movement during your USSR times, during the Cold War, there is one example of a person who was, and this is really, I think, very interesting because he had everything. He was a peace activist. He was also in party politics, and he was also an academic. And so there was everything included, but also an agent of the KGB and Eastern German intelligence. So, do you have any examples? Can you give us one examples how academics work compared to other kind of agents of influence? You told me a
Hmm.
story about an artist. Uh,
Yes, this is
without
an interesting case.
without
Yes.
mentioning names, but if you could give us
Yeah.
a clear distinction, how many faces these influence operations can have.
Tons,
And we're
tons. It
talking
could
about
be
offline.
anyone.
Everything is offline, but
Yeah.
I want to highlight that these
Yeah.
offline operations, they play a huge role in the online world
They
because it's
do.
high quality content. These
Yeah.
quotes by the professors, you can see them on TikTok, and everybody thinks, "Oh my God, it's so cool." I'm even if it's only social media, but it's a professor who is speaking. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, remember that the media then amplifies, okay? Without social media, these, let's say, events that take place everywhere. So when we talk about the different influence operations that they can use, we used to talk about this as cultural diplomacy. Okay, cultural diplomacy is used to give a positive image of your country, and you are not there to spread disinformation. Okay. Instead, okay, the other, let's say, what Russians are doing, Chinese are doing, there is an intent to cause problems inside. Okay. Not only to give their own point of view, but also for other kinds of strategies that they have in mind, divide society, for example. Okay, or spread dissatisfaction, right, about your government and different things like that. So if you think of all of the different human expressions there can be in culture, art, concerts, street art, okay, which is the case that I was looking at, um, then poetry, you could get into, let's say, tours, okay, because a lot of these little micro associations are making school tours, language courses, okay. They also have training courses for journalists, would-be journalists, for example. And this was done by Russia and China. If you want to read up on it, the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Report from 2023 has a whole list of all of these journalists from the West that were trained in Sochi. Okay, so this is something else that they do. Anything at all, any way that they can get to the micro level, all right, to a lower level with the thing, so that you have this idea that the culture that you're coming into contact with through art, through music, through books, through media appearances, through sport. We haven't talked about sport. All of this, chess games, anything at all right, that people would normally, you'd be disarmed, right? You're not thinking, oh, this is an operation. No, okay, this is an operation. Um, Anywhere that they can get so that they can give you the impression, oh, we're the good guys. We're not, we're like you. We love, okay, music just the way you do. All right. For one example, there was the Russian Red Army that used to tour all of Europe and the United States, okay, to bring their music. Everybody thought, oh, that's really cool. Okay. Today, there are, if you go onto my feed, okay, you can see all of the different artists that are going all over Russian, and they work for sanctioned individuals. Okay, either they work for the government or they work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or they receive money from President Putin's from Putin's he has, I think, a fund, no, the president's fund that he does all of this. Education and schooling is another thing, right? Publication of books, all right? The case that you're talking about that I brought to the fore, others have looked at it as well, is a particular person who he's working with a network, because remember, this is all networked, okay, with other people that are involved. And he basically was a street artist. And in the beginning of the full scale, he had painted a mural of Dostoevsky in front of a high school, because this is another thing too. They're trying to get into youth groups, okay, especially through TikTok, for example. But they're trying to connect with younger people because you need to educate the younger people. This is what they're after. So they put this mural of Dostoevsky, who is, no, as we know, a literary figure and, okay, as seen as apolitical in front of a high school, all right, in a town in Italy. Then we see him again painting murals, also in Mariupol, which was absolutely horrific. There was a big scandal around that one. And there was
in occupied Mariupol, yeah, that's
occupied
important. Yeah,
Mariupol. Exactly,
the
Mariupol.
Russian
And
occupied.
then, okay, we see the same person in Sochi, okay, in Sochi at an event, a youth, okay, the Youth World Congress that, no, the Russians put together. And at this Congress, we see him and he's taking a picture with Putin and he's asking Putin questions. Okay, so these, by the way, this was all coordinated because at each step, okay, not only was there the mural, the fabrication or the creation of the piece of art, okay, that had a political message of so-called peace. Right after that, there was, for example, films that were disseminated in Italy under the same association that took him, okay, to Sochi. All right. So these are all coordinated. This is also something that we just
But
don't understand.
can
They're
I add something?
coordinating.
Can I ask you something especially
Yeah,
particular about that because it provokes a thought that I have many times. Um, these peace messages and these more subtle messages, these cultural diplomacy tricks. I mean, it's not really cultural diplomacy, it's
no,
propaganda. And
yeah,
then you have what you said in Sochi, this youth conference. Many
yes,
people even will deny that this is a problem, but then we have the picture with Putin. And when we have the picture with Putin, I think even excuse me to put it that way, even the dumbest person should understand what's going on here. Yeah. And
yeah,
what I see, I have a lot of cases like this where we have a kind of storyline like this, or we have different parts of information, but people tend to ignore the big picture and
yeah,
they refuse to understand the context, the whole context of this actor. So, for instance,
yeah.
you have somebody propagating these cultural things and they ignore all the other statements. And I will break the rule of our podcast and I'm going to mention one name, Jeffrey Sachs. For instance, Jeffrey
Mm,
Sachs was a guest at the so-called peace conference in Vienna. And he was considered a person who is critical of the West, but it's a neutral analysis and so on. Yeah? But what was not highlighted was that he was several times a guest of the talk show of Solovyov, who is
mhm.
obviously a Russian warmonger and propagandist, and I'm not even afraid to say
Good.
it because no court in the world will deny that fact.
He's
Yeah,
sanctioned. He's
except
sanctioned by the EU. We can
yeah, he's
say it.
sanctioned by the EU. So except the Russian or maybe Lukashenko court, everybody will recognize this. And he was there at least four times. He was a guest there. Meanwhile, not back then when he was at the conference here. He was there only twice or something. And and then people still refuse to understand the context of such person. And by the way, he gives also interviews to Russia Today. So how can we? What can we do to deliver, to give this
Mm,
big picture, to give this whole analysis, this context about certain actors when people refuse to recognize their subtle propaganda? Because I have big problems to explain subtle propaganda because it works so well. You can see it on Instagram, these travel influencers and how they work.
yeah.
How
Yeah,
can
the
we
travel
how can we give
influencers.
the context? I mean, the picture with Putin, it's a perfect example because this is something everybody understands, but we don't have this smoking gun all the time to
No.
put it for evidence.
No, no. Well, because as I think that the way that you explained it before, remember that these people do this very, very slowly. It's not done from one moment to another where boom, the person becomes a propagandist. Okay. Jeffrey Sachs started a long time ago, seeding certain narratives and then getting more and more, okay, closer to a certain position. So we have those people that, are like that. One thing I think that, especially in terms of foreign, let's say our Western media, state media, I'm talking about, because private stations, unfortunately, can do whatever they want, okay? But our state media should be able to preface and say, give context. We are interviewing, sure, you can interview Solovyev, but you better tell us who he is, right? And exactly what his role is and what, no? The problem is that what happened here in Italy, because he was also invited here, or the foreign ministry, the ambassador, for example, Lavrov was interviewed on Italian television. No context whatsoever, no context of saying that ambassadors, for example, are working in an environment where they are intelligence gatherers, okay, where they're working with, all right, Russian intelligence. The ambassador, the embassy in Rome is a little intelligence center. This is what they're there for. Okay. This is the kind of thing. There's no information to give that has been given to audiences, especially broader audiences, okay, of exactly who these people are, all right, and what they're doing, what their end game is. With the subtle, that's a little more difficult because we understand who they are, because we see someone and it's like, oh, hold on a minute, okay, who is this person? All right, which is the first question we should be asking whenever we see anything. Who is the person? What is their message? Why now? What is the message now? Why are they putting this now? And then to follow, okay, this person along and say, okay, are they changing up? All right, the message. I'm not going to say who, but I was following someone for almost 3 years, and they started out in a way that was, I would not say pro-Russian, but they were looking into topics that were traditionally, okay, Russian topics and that could be put into that category. When the full scale started, this person was very pro-Ukrainian. And I sat there and I said, that's interesting. And then a little at a time, right? Little at a time, this person penetrated different institutions because I've been following this person all along. And I said, very interesting. Became a star in 2023, okay, shot up right to the top of the experts chart, all right. And now, just recently, has published and said things online that are all in line with Russian narratives. Completely.
So welcome
So I
back,
said, so
and
first,
we will
right?
speak
But
about
this
a
is a
specific case of how to say, about the evolving process of an influence agent.
Yeah, an influencer. There, as we were saying before, Dietmar. Now, normally, and since we're practitioners, we do ask certain questions. Who is this person? Who is their network? You go and look to see who they follow, who they're being followed by. You look to see the work that they've produced. Okay, the kind of keywords that come out of their work. If there is a certain bent or alignment that they have, all right, even very subtle alignment, okay? And we do this because this is our work, all right? Normal people cannot. They usually don't, all right? In some of our off-record, let's say conversations, we're talking about vetting, okay? And this is something that even as a person who you don't have a lot of context, but you'd like to know, right? Is this person okay, right? I'm reading this because if you don't know a little bit about the person that you're reading or so on and so forth, you don't know perhaps what their intention could be, okay? Because it all boils down to intention. Another thing too, and just as a general rule, and we started our conversation this way, you're going into an information space that basically we are at war. Okay, it's not a hot war. We haven't got bombs dropping on our heads, but it is war nonetheless. So as you would go, for example, even into a doctor, why wouldn't you want to find out who is this doctor that's taking care of me? Is this a good doctor? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you do that also in other areas that affect your way of thinking, your brain, the way that you're making decisions, the way that you perceive reality? So this is extremely important. As I said, we're practitioners. We do ask the questions, who is this person? Who do they work for? How long have they been doing this? What are their publications? Who are their network? Okay. Can they be trusted? Right? And even then, sometimes, you make mistakes. So, I mean, we're not all perfect. Um, this is what we do as practitioners. If you're not, you would just, say, well, okay, who passed me this information? Who is this author? Who is this journalist? Who is this expert? Where do they work? Okay. Have they ever appeared in Valdai Club? Just maybe some basic Russian, okay, associations, for example, that they could have been there. So that's the kind of thing, right? That is important to do.
So this is something that bothers me a lot, that we lack this 360-degree actors analysis, and we just I mean and what I also think is that they have a target audience differentiated approach, which means that if they speak in front of a certain kind of target audience, they do it very subtle, they do it almost objective, they even criticize China, Russia a little bit at least. And
Yep.
when they have another audience, it's pure propaganda, and you think you're watching RT or some Chinese outlet. Um, as I mentioned Chinese, and you also mentioned China a lot of times, I see there are a lot of parallels and a lot of cooperation. And it's not only China, it's also Iran, you mentioned, but also countries like Venezuela. I remember after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Telesur, this channel played a role disseminating Russian narratives and even completely
Huge.
fake news. What do you think? Mm, how big is the lack of awareness about this global information war that we are facing, and these narratives like the global South, which is very much used to create anti-Western sentiment?
Oh no, it's 100%. People do not equate. Let's say there's a bias in, let's say, Russian. Everybody says, oh, no, they're great at information warfare, and this is that, and the other. The Chinese just want to buy us. Okay, that's what I hear. All right. They just want to buy and want to get into our societies in order to get resources and take over. Okay. Economic coercion. That's as much as as they'll go. This is the normal person. If you start looking at things, you brought up something that is extremely important because right now, um, we cannot, let's say, deal with Russia separately from dealing with China and Iran. Okay. They basically have coalesced into an alliance, okay, of information warfare. And this is important to understand. China has come a very, very long way in its messaging and the tactics, okay, that it uses and the resources, because we're talking about Russia and China are the largest. They dedicate huge amounts of financial resources and human resources, okay, to information warfare. The reason being is that if they can conquer a country without actually going to war, it's better. All right, that's their main thing, right? How to fight a war without fighting it physically, right? And that's basically what they're doing. And the Chinese, they follow this. The Chinese have, for example, their philosophy towards this. The doctrine that they follow is called the three warfares. And here we're talking about three distinct, but also at times overlapping, okay, strategies that they have. So there's, let's say, political warfare that they do. Not political, how can I put it? Opinion, they call it public opinion, okay, warfare. So this is getting to the people, right, themselves. There's the legal warfare or lawfare, as we call it today. And then there's also psychological warfare, all right, as well. And this is the doctrine that they use in order let's say, influence people in the West. You brought up the global South. I mean, for them, their whole media infrastructure is absolutely immense. They have taken over huge swaths. Africa, for example, the whole continent is basically, I would put it at about 70% Chinese media. Okay. So we're talking about a huge output here. There are 20 million netizens that work, all right, for the United Front Work Department. And they are there every day, all right? They used to be called the 50 Cent Army, all right? But this is what we're talking about. And the way that they have penetrated Western media is either they call it the boat strategy. So basically, they take over. What they did in Kenya, okay, for example, with Star Media, is that they offered free, okay, free video content. They offered infrastructure, okay. They set you up for free. What they ask every once in a while is that you put out propaganda, okay, for them, Chinese propaganda. And this is the way that they do it. And they've done this with media also in the United States, in Europe, okay, there are quite a few. Impresa, for example, in Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic, sorry. And they're all over, okay? Radio, Chinese international radio, for example. So there's a huge penetration. Very few people look at it. I think it's more a cultural issue and a language issue. And also looking towards that and understanding the Chinese mindset, which is what I am taking a deeper dive into now, because I think it's quite important. And for them, the global South and all the narratives, right, of peaceful Chinese development in the global South, we're going to become a huge community. China, the rejuvenation of China. China is a peaceful nation that only wants to bring prosperity to other countries. These are the kind of narratives, okay, that they push out. And of course, the counter narrative towards, or the narratives that they have towards the United States and the West. The United States is a corrupt society. The people, the whole, there's violence in society. They're going through economic problems. They're spending more on arms and not on their own people. There's all that, all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of crossover in terms of narratives, but in telling their own story, because this is no one side, China says, we're telling our story, okay? And Russia tells their story, all right? What we are not doing is telling our own story. This is extremely important. Storytelling, narrative, okay, the creation of narratives is something that the West, we were good at it at one point, World War I, World War II, even, okay, the Americans, for example, in various wars that they fought in the Middle East, sometimes good, no, whatever. But we've dropped the ball there. We don't know how to tell our stories anymore. And I think the only other person that's popped out and unfortunately has taken over is Trump. He knows how to tell a story. That's the way it is. Okay, so this is something that we need to work on, okay, as let's say in the West, telling our story.
But it's also a problem, I think, beside that we are not able to tell a story, that we are also not able to analyze what's going on, to understand what kind of stories they try to sell us and what it actually means. Because the Global South story, I mean, every time I hear the Global South sees things different about the full-scale invasion, then I ask, what is different? What does it change? Does it change that it's an imperialistic war fought by Russia, that they are attempting at least a cultural genocide against Ukrainians? Yeah? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change that it's imperialistic. It doesn't change that Moscow is an imperialistic colonial power, also within its own country. So it doesn't change anything about that. And there are also people in Africa who understand this, despite the propaganda, and who fight the influence by Russian and Chinese propaganda, but they are in many cases considered traitors or Western stooges or something, which makes
Yeah.
their work even more difficult. And we need to raise, in my opinion, more awareness also about their work and support.
We do. But we also have to be there, Dietmar, because if you get, for example, okay, traveling, if you travel into Africa, I have not been, okay, so I am basing my, from other people that I talk to. You know, you go into a hotel, okay, and what kind of channels have they got? They got Chinese media and they've got Russian media. All right, disguised maybe as something else, but that's what they have. Why? Because in hotels, CNN, they would have to pay CNN or they would have to pay for the BBC. Instead, Russian and Chinese, it's all for free. You see what I mean? Or very, very little. They're charged very, very little, okay, for the actual service itself, and they're provided infrastructure. In the global south, we have dropped the ball there completely. All right. It's a real, real problem. And whether you believe it or not, okay, of course, we understand that what Russia is doing there, what China is doing there is imperialistic. We understand this. But how many people are actually paying attention, even amongst, even amongst the normal national populations? And remember, too, they've been there for a very long time. They've been there since the 50s, right? During the Cold War. They never left.
And the
We
active
left.
measures, remember if you read old articles and old books or old documentaries
Yeah,
about active measures and previous operation by Moscow, there is a lot was happening there. And back then they used to call it the third world, but it was what we call today the global south. And
yeah.
they used disinformation campaigns, and they were very much accepted by the governments. And it was, and at least back then, Western diplomacy tried to debunk it and to explain that it's not true. And according to the reports, in some cases they were successful. But now we like the strategy. And there was this difference when they say, yeah, we ignore it because we would dignify it if we would not ignore it. But I
Um,
think we need to tackle it wherever we find it. It's just my
yeah,
approach. I don't
yeah.
know what is
No, no,
yours,
no,
but
no. No, no, no. There are different ways of approaching it. I found one, this is maybe something we can get into a little more in detail, but when you're taking, let's say, on, when you're trying to counter these networks and disinformation, Chinese or Russian or whatever, I found one thing that was very, very interesting, a way of doing it. And I agree with you that it has to be taken on somehow. Two things, defensive and offensive actions. Okay. In the defensive and offensive slash, you can use them both. First of all, it's like a chain, right? A disinformation chain. So there are four parts to it. Okay. You can attack the leadership, Russian or Chinese leadership. In here, we're talking about whoever it is that's at the top, okay, of the chain. And then you've got the actors, okay, who are carrying out the orders, right, from the top. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, the MFA, right, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs all over the world. This is one of their things. Or the United Front, okay, the Chinese United Front, wherever they are. And then you have the dissemination channels, the amplification channels. You can also attack, right, the situation there. And then you get to the consumer level. And you can also do attacks, offensive and defensive there. And what I'm talking about is the actual target audiences. Okay. So at each of these points, depending on the institution, private, public, or whatever, they can be attacked, right? Now, obviously, at the top of the chain, that's something that's much more institutional. I can't take on the Kremlin, right? It would have to be my government through sanctions, through getting at those specific people that are there. With the MFA in somehow or another, again, that would be more institutional. Where we can act is the dissemination channel, the amplification channels, okay, where we raise awareness of what they're actually doing. And now it's going to be a huge, big, huge mess because you've got Meta now, right, who have decided to take off their monitoring of, like, say, fact checkers. And then we can also work on the people that are directly affected, which are the consumers themselves. So that's the area that we can do more work in because we're private and we're working on these kind of things. Institutionally, we can make recommendations on how to attack, all right, the people at the top. But this is something that can be done. You're absolutely right. The resources that were given, that were provided during the Cold War, right? Then we got out of the Cold War and everything was okay with Russia, but then there was a great war on terror that gobbled up a lot of resources. And today there's very little that's being given, and most of it is being done, for example, through private associations, NGOs. There are some excellent centers, centers of excellence that are looking at this, but that's, I think, going back again to the beginning of our talk and our discussion. It's that we first have to change our mindsets to understand, okay, what we have in front of us. That this is information warfare, is what they're doing. Cognitive warfare is what they're doing. And walking into a social media space, that's just one. They're media outlets, whatever is on the internet that we have direct contact with. We have to understand what we have in front of us, whether it's there to either inform us or to attack us, and we have to understand what that is. So that's the thing, and it's going to get even worse, Dietmar. Wait till the deep fakes come in.
Yeah, this is in my recent presentation when I spoke about agents of influence, I explained that we're going to have a lot of infiltrators that are AI generated, yeah, like
Oh yeah.
Terminators. And
Yes.
the Terminator infiltrator, they fought against humans and they looked like people, so they can be good infiltrators, yeah.
Well,
And
you
this
know
is what the
what?
bots are
Look,
doing now, and they're getting smarter. You can have actually a conversation with them, and
of
this.
course, of course. If you take a look at what happened just now during this is just one example, during the American elections, right? The US presidential elections. There was spamouflage, which was an operation which was carried out by the Chinese. They set up a whole bunch. They started, I think the year before, if I'm not mistaken, because I sent out a message to somebody and I said, "What is this?" And they were like these street fight videos. Hmm? And I said, "What are these street fight videos? Why is there all this violence?" I know that Musk, as soon as Musk took over, there was like an increase in violent videos. But these videos were very particular because they played up on, for example, the divide, okay, the deep-seated divisions, I guess, between certain cultural groups and all of that kind of thing. And I sat there and I said, "Oh, wow, this stuff is really evil. It's awful." I said, "What is this?" Then they changed and they became MAGA accounts. So, and you could tell they're part of a network that's called Follow Back, FO, and they're Chinese, basically. They're all Chinese. So this was done just before the presidential election, the change, the switch. And it was huge. I mean, they had like thousands of them. And I said, wow. I said, oh my God. And they're all like these MAGA accounts, right? Trump is going to bring peace. We know how that's working out now. you know?
Uh,
But this is what you're saying. This is just one thing. When you start getting into fake videos where we cannot tell the difference if this or are images or forgeries, because remember, this is based on the old active measures forgery. Okay. So, you're looking at something, you don't know if it's real, right? Or a part of it is not real. It could be a real video and they just insert something really, really subtle, okay, inside. These things are going to be extremely difficult. Audios, for example, okay, that we don't know if they've been manufactured. And by the way, NATO is looking at this very carefully because this was written quite a few years ago, but there's the whole chaos operations that use, fake videos. and audios, fake audios, to create chaos in a target, okay, in a target audience, in a target country that they're preparing to attack, okay, to cause deep, let's say, anxiety, stress, tension. And these are normally accompanied also by cyber attacks as well on infrastructure. So NATO is preparing for these kind of scenarios, and the Americans as well, obviously, in NATO.
Which brings me to my final question, because you spoke about this Chinese network operation, where we know what the purpose is to seed division or to create chaos. I saw also other cases, especially if it's about far right pages, and also AI generated content where we don't know what the purpose is in some cases, except to create user audience, and then you can do whatever you want with them. Also, it's about fraud, of course, about money and criminal activities. And then I saw one example where there is a page spreading
Mm.
German, particular for the German audience in Germany, so not
Mhm.
German speaking. It's particular about against the Green Party. So you have one storyline all the same. It's against the Greens, it's against climate measures, it's
Yeah.
against, it's very pro far right, and for traditional values and all this stuff. Yeah? And
Mhm.
and they use the same memes everywhere. That one person produces the meme and then they use it for a number of operations and channels. So what is
Yeah.
interesting about this channel is that back in 2023, it was not a far
Mhm.
right German channel.
Mhm.
It was a
Mhm.
channel about pool. Yeah, about the game pool. Yeah,
Yeah.
be,
Yeah. Okay.
and 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 you could see all the videos and the marbles and how they were playing, and they
Yeah.
stole the
Yeah.
content for these videos from a YouTube page, which is absolutely not political. Yeah, so they created the page to do something, to establish some kind of trust, maybe also for Meta, so it will not
Of
get down
course.
soon. Yeah, so that it has a history. And this page had all the interactions were with Indonesia and Malaysia and these regions. And I
Oh
know
yeah.
that there is a lot of troll farming activity.
Mhm.
Regarding the fact that Indonesia, for instance, is joining BRICS,
Mhm.
do you think that these troll farms and these corporations, is it only a financial thing, like they are mercenaries, or is it also politically? Because, for
No,
instance, when we know that Russian hackers, they can do everything except if it's against Russia or allies.
yeah. Well, no, Russian hackers we know are just Russians working. They're either mob or they're no Russian intelligence. So, the whole idea of the Russian hacker that just pops up out of nowhere. No. That kind of thing. What you're mentioning, yes, there's a lot of this, this kind of thing. I ran into a few websites that were outlets that purported to be media outlets. Another thing that they're doing as well, so that they're creating, like they just create them because they all look the same, by the way. All right, these websites. They look like media outlets, but they're exactly the same kind of thing, and they can be generated overnight, even to put out, for example, one piece of disinformation. And then they go and they hide and they disappear. This happened in Italy with one, okay, outlet that had to put out a piece of disinformation about the Russian guy that was killed in Spain. Okay, so they can create, all right, all of these amplification channels because that's what they need. And then they can also, as I said, the FOs, they can also just choose the exact same thing. How about all of those animal videos? Has anybody looked into see, I finally find out that they're all Chinese. And I said this from the beginning. I said, what's the cute little animal video? Right? I said, why are these little animal videos going on? Now, those could turn into something else because once they've created, for example, followers and follower lists where they can make networks and they understand um, and they also do, for example, all of the sorry, the word is not coming, the analysis, okay, on the network itself. Then at that point they can tailor information to that target audience specifically. What you were talking about, okay, was that, there was this channel, and it was uh, the FOs, for example, all of that, the channel that I was talking about the violent street videos, that was first started by a betting channel. So you could put bets. Okay. So they first attract the audience into something that, these people like. And then they find out what are the keywords? How can we, manipulate them? And that's how it starts, right? That's what they do. But they first have to attract. Okay. That's what their big thing is, numbers. Because for the Russians and for the Chinese, we're talking about inundating spaces, inundating the information space. That is the most important thing for them. It's not quality, but it's quantity, right?
There are so many videos where they, I mean, it's animal abuse. Yeah, obvious. Yeah, what they do to these little monkeys. Yeah, do you saw these videos where they dress monkeys like babies
Yeah.
and wash them? Yeah, and some of them, I mean, they are not in China, but maybe Thailand. But is China also behind this with these videos, maybe? And are they also exploited? What's the reason? Because they gain so many followers, and I
Yeah.
mean, there are people who understand that it's animal abuse. It's beside the political, maybe warfare that is
Yeah.
connected to it. But there are people who don't understand it and who say, "Oh my God, so cute." Is it also a way to target stupid people and get a list of as many stupid people as possible to
Well, no,
exploit them?
definitely. Well, of course. Well, they find out the data. The data is the important part, is trying to get, okay, think of Brexit. All right. The first kind of posts that they were putting out on social media through Facebook they were about animals, about the polar bears, how to save the bears. Okay. And people would click on that, which would take you to other information. All right. So they were looking for a specific type. Remember that these people also do profiles. They do psychological profiles. This is our target audience. This is who we need to influence. How do we influence them? What are the triggers that we can use to influence them? What will make them, click on my picture? All right. And they want this kind of person, because all they really need is a few. And then from there, right, they're hoping, okay, then this message will get to all of this person's contacts. Okay. So definitely remember that in influence operations, I mean, from my own training, you look at it, you look at a group, what's the target group, okay, that you want to influence? What do they believe? What would they believe? What kind of information would they want to read? All right. And is this useful, all right, in any way? But
I'm
this
so
is,
sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we are in our last minute. So, and I would not like to stop the video without saying thank you very much. And I'm sure we're going to talk
oh, definitely.
again. And
Thank
please,
you.
I would also invite the audience, follow Monique Camarra. She's extraordinary informed about everything that is going on and geopolitically wise and also information warfare. Thank you very much and looking
Thank
forward
you,
to see you
Dietmar.
again.
Yes, yes, very soon.
You have the final word because I know you don't like it.
No, I just want to thank you for inviting me and being able to talk about all of this. And I look forward to our next chat.
Goodbye. Have a good afternoon.
You
Bye.
too.